We ordered our 2016 Winnebago Travato 59G in November of 2015. It was the culmination of several years of research and discussion between my wife and me. I love travel and road trips in particular, so I'd been trying to sell her on the idea of a camper van for several years. We both work in ways that don't require us to be in an office, and our then 11-year-old son was homeschooled, so we had the freedom to take these kind of trips. So after test driving a slightly larger RV, we decided that a camper van would best fit our use case scenarios. The G floor plan in particular of the Travato would seat 4 people, and we figured that by putting a camper pad under the back bed, we could put our son there, and if we had a 4th person, they could sleep on the dinette, which turns into a bed. So travel with 4 if we needed to. Mostly we were thinking it was going to be 3, my wife and I and our son. We ended up taking possession on February 12th of 2016, and we named the van Bardd, which is the original Welsh word for a traveling storyteller and musician. The word bard in English comes from that. And I made a video about Bardd at the time, and so I put the link to that video in the description below. In this video, however, I'm going to give you a 10-year and 6-month review of our ownership of Bardd. And how often do you get to see a 10-year review of a camper van, really? I don't know. This may be the only one on the internet. I'm going to briefly talk about our travels, and then I'm going to go through the issues we've had with the van, mainly chassis problems. We've had some maintenance issues with the house side of the van, but those were all kind of expected. I'm going to go through an entire walkthrough of the house side of the van and talk about all the modifications that we've made and the things that we like and dislike about them. That's going to be a big part of the video. Let's start with the fun part, the travel. Since buying the van, we have put over 175,000 miles on it. We've driven through every one of the lower 48 states, as well as several Canadian provinces. We've taken multiple trips to the Southwest and even driven to Florida and back twice from Oregon. We've been from the Olympic Peninsula in Washington to Acadia National Park in Maine. We've driven through the Redwoods to Yosemite, down to San Diego, through Joshua Tree, the Mojave Desert, and Death Valley, over to the Grand Canyon, from Zion and Arches to Big Bend National Park in Texas, up through Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and over the Rocky Mountains. We've spent time in Colorado, Kansas, and Missouri, from the Gateway Arch of St. Louis, south through the Ozarks to the bayous. We took the ferry across Mobile Bay into the Florida Panhandle and back on another trip. We visited the National Historic Site of Andersonville in southern Georgia. We popped over to Savannah and up to Charleston, South Carolina. We drove the Blue Ridge Parkway and visited my childhood home of Princeton, West Virginia, in the heart of Appalachia. We stayed with friends in Maryland, visited our nation's capital, and enjoyed the historical sites of Pennsylvania and New England. Every summer for the past 11 years, we've driven from Oregon to Cape Cod and back, always a slightly different route, mixing back roads and freeways as time permits. We've been through Yosemite, the Tetons, the Badlands.
Can look up the president's nostrils.
Roosevelt National Park, to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. After one particularly stressful driving trip through Chicago and the Rust Belt, we decided we preferred taking the northern route through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to the Trans-Canada Highway through Sault Ste. Marie, and then dropping down into upstate New York, the Adirondacks, and then taking the ferry across Lake Champlain, We visited the original Ben and Jerry's, and then we stopped in to see Sarah's relatives in New Hampshire, Maine, and the Boston area. We've averaged more than 60 nights a year in this rig, and we prefer to sleep in it when we're visiting friends and family. It's simply our home on wheels. It's a home away from home. Our poor youngest son, Taryn, who recently graduated from the University of Idaho, grew up in this van. Sarah actually got weepy looking through all the photos. This van is truly one of the best purchases we've ever made. It's just the value we've gotten out of it is great. One of the things that we did not anticipate when we bought the van is that it really changed the way in which we travel. We're much more spontaneous and flexible. One afternoon in October, for instance, of 2023, we decided to head to the Steens Mountains in southeastern Oregon to see an eclipse. We were there the next day and we got to see the eclipse. We had a little adventure with a flat tire in a campground, but that's a story for another day. When we're doing our annual trip to Cape Cod and back, we set up visits with friends and relatives, but then travel as much or as little as we want on the days in between, so we leave it wide open. We often find places to stay on the fly. It's much easier to travel this way in the western United States than the east, but even on the East Coast, there's a lot of flexibility. And worst case scenario, we can find a quiet street and sleep there. We've never been asked to move, and we've only had someone kind of harass us by banging on the side of the van once. It was in a Walmart in Lacey, Washington. Interestingly, because Sarah and I went to high school in the Olympia area, so it's kind of our hometown. It's just a great way to travel, and it's allowed us to go places we never would have gone and to see things that we never would have seen without the van. Now, that said, it hasn't been all fun and games. While the van has only left us stranded on one occasion, and luckily we were at our daughter's house in Portland, Oregon, on the way to a family wedding, we've had issues with the ProMaster chassis from the get-go. We brought it home and immediately discovered an oil leak that required replacement of engine seals. The rear alignment was out of spec on the very first tire rotation, and we ended up having to fight the dealer to get them to replace the rear axle. You can't adjust the alignment on the rear tires on these rigs, and that should have been indicative of our relationship with that dealership, but we went on as it was. We had a cold start issue that required service, at some point. It was fairly minor. We hit a deer in South Dakota, which is obviously not the van's fault, but, was kind of a bummer. Sarah made me put a bull bar on the front of the van after that. However, we then had this persistent issue with our manual automatic transmission, where it blew a fuse in the hydraulic system that allowed the van to shift. And that's what stranded us in Portland. That problem persisted, but we just kept extra fuses in the van, and when it cropped up every few months, we'd replace it. Unfortunately, I later discovered that the Dodge dealership that was servicing our rig, the same one we had to fight to get the alignment fixed, hadn't done the service on the transmission that was required. Now, this either caused or contributed to the issue with the transmission, and eventually we had to replace the entire transmission. This ended up being more problematic than we could have imagined. The diesel ProMaster van was only sold in the US from 2014 to 2016, so 3 model years. So it was really difficult to source parts. And in addition, this was during COVID, which just aggravated the supply chain problems. We'd gone to a new Dodge dealership at this time in Walla Walla, Washington, who were great to work with, but they were having trouble getting the part, and they were really good about communicating with us. We were still driving the van through all this, and it just threw error codes, and we often had to clear those ourselves in order to keep driving. But when the dealership told us they weren't sure when they'd be able to source the part, they even recommended maybe we try to get a part from a wrecking yard and pay a non-dealer to replace the transmission. I posted about this in the Facebook Travato group, and somebody from Winnebago reached out to me, and I sent him documentation about what I was running into. And a couple days later, I got a call from the dealership in Walla Walla, the service manager, and he said, "I don't know who you know, but I got a call today from a guy at Stellantis that I didn't know existed, and we're going to have you a new transmission in a couple weeks." So that worked out real well. And actually, the service manager was really happy because he now had connection to this guy to get parts that they were having trouble sourcing otherwise. I also got a call from a customer service rep at Stellantis, and they were really good about keeping me up to date on the process. And we got the transmission replaced. It cost $7,000, and we were willing to pay that. I was getting ready to pay it, actually. But I told the rep, you guys have a problem with this other dealership that we've been working with. And I discovered in my records that they hadn't done the service on the transmission that I'd asked them to do. And I kind of felt like this was my fault for not double checking. But the service rep asked for my records, which I sent her. And then a few days later, she called and said, "We're paying for your transmission." So that was a great outcome of that. Not ideal. Ideally, the transmission wouldn't have failed, but Stellantis did a good job with the customer service in the end. So all these problems we kind of consider a cost of doing business. We love the form factor of this van so much, and I'm going to take some time now to shift to actually talking about the van itself, the house of the van itself, and all the modifications that we've made to make it perfect for us. So we're going to start at the back of the van here, and you can see one of the early things we did was used to be drawers underneath the bed there, the upper level, and we took those out and replaced it with wire shelving, which more than tripled the storage space. It's not quite as organized, but it was great. You can see there's gray batteries on the right there. We'll talk about those. Those are lithium batteries that we did an upgrade with.
The we being Dan.
Yes, and my brother-in-law, Brad. You'll see a picture of Brad taking out our generator later. But so, yeah, I added insulation in here as well, actually throughout the entire van. It really was only set up to be a 3-season van, but I added insulation and sound deadening, which you see in the wheel well there. We put it in the doors as well, and it really made a difference. This is a little battery-operated light for underneath the bed because, as I mentioned earlier, Taryn was sleeping under there.
And those hooks were to hang the mattress on when we were driving.
That's right. I added strike plates to the support for the Murphy bed there because it just used this little rubber thing. You can see the rubber thing there, and I added these felt pads, and it just made it a little more solid, a little more robust. We used the bed, as I've said earlier, we slept in the bed about 60 nights a year. Found it very comfortable, easy to get up and down. We replaced the window covers in the back. There used to be a pull-down shade here, a roll-down. Replaced that with the van-made blackout shade and also the back window, which are insulated. Made a big difference in keeping the temperature cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter. We added, just recently we started using this fan, ceiling fan.
Known as the decapitation fan.
Yeah, Sarah really likes it. It's great if you're not using the air conditioner to keep the air moving. And you can see all the white in here is contact paper that I added, actually kind of a vinyl contact paper, and it brightened up this space. This all was the wood, and we really like the brightness of having the white. It makes the space feel bigger. This is a step that I added, a fold-away step to make it easier to get in and out of bed. And here you see back under the bed again. This area to the left. You see the batteries to the right. That's electronic stuff. We'll talk about that later. But there used to be a little drawer in there as well. We also upgraded the refrigerator. So the original refrigerator that came with the van wasn't great. We took it out after 2 or 3 years and put in, actually it was probably 4 or 5 years, and put in these 2 refrigerators as a replacement. The chest refrigerator and freezer, or freezer actually, can be set up either as a refrigerator or a freezer on the bottom. Had great capacity. We could put lots of ice cream in there. The refrigerator on the top worked well as too. We had tons of space.
Yeah, way more than just the refrigerator we had before. And of course, if you need a freezer, that makes a huge difference to have this chest freezer instead.
That's right. And above the refrigerator, you have the microwave where we would store like paper plates and napkins and that sort of thing. But we used the microwave a lot, especially once we had the lithium system with the inverter, so we could run it without being plugged in or without the generator running. The cupboard, the wardrobe was one of Sarah's favorite.
Yeah, I like to hang up my clothes, so I use that extensively.
Yeah. And then there's a pantry above that where we put a lot of dried foods usually. And as we look down here, we added this hanging garbage can.
One of the best things we did.
That's
so
right.
Simple.
Yep, the little Velcro tabs held it on, kept it from falling down. We did knock it off occasionally. But then we also have shoe storage there. We could get 4, maybe 5 pairs of shoes, 4 pairs of shoes and sandals. And then the galley, we often use our rig, like I said, 4 months of the year. So we had to worry about the galley getting cold because it had water lines underneath it that would freeze. So I created vent holes in the galley there. Here you see us parked in the winter. And so I created these vents along the bottom, both the rectangular one on the left and this round one on the right. And then cut out the center of that cabinet and put a screen in there. And it kept the air moving, and it really kept it warmer in there. I had a thermometer in there for a long time, and usually we could keep it above freezing in there, and it made a big difference. I did freeze the pipes in there the first year when I had left the cabinet open, and our son came out and closed it, and the next day the pipes were frozen. Anyway, had to replace the latches on these drawers. These drawers were great. I mean, yeah. They're kind of the perfect size. I had a problem here with, this is our hillbilly funnel, but I was cleaning out the van while I was making this video. So you can see the drawer space was really good, and it just worked. I don't know, nothing special to say about that. The under cabinet storage was good. I did replace, there's a pump in there that pumps water out from the shower, which I replaced with the more robust pump. I moved the water filter up higher. I mounted it higher up to create more storage space inside there. But yeah, we found this really useful. The galley itself, the sink is a little small, and we never really liked it that much, but it worked. The propane stove we used a lot, but then we had some issues with our propane at various times, and so we brought along this induction burner once we had our robust electrical system. You just saw a picture of shower caps, which we would put over the over the smoke detector when we're cooking.
I know it's not even when we're cooking; it's all the time because we set it off every single time we cooked initially.
Yes, that's true. And this is our hillbilly insulation over the vent fan. It worked really well as well. Kept the heat out in the summer and the cold out in the winter. The bathroom we used a lot. The toilet the 2 of us could use it for a week without dumping. We didn't use the shower that much, but when we needed it, it was great to have.
Yeah, and you fixed the drain so that it drained straight down.
That's right. The drain used to have kind of a sump down there, and I tore that out and replaced it with this drain, which made it much easier to keep it clean. So yeah, the bathroom was great. So we're going to move to the front here. We're going to talk about the dinette. And the we really like the dinette, and we use the dinette converts into a bed, which we used pretty regularly. Once again, it was kind of like the shower. We didn't use it all the time, but when we wanted it, it was really great to have. The seat's not very comfortable, but that's okay. Created this storage space underneath the seats where I kept the jack and some tools. A little difficult to get to, but a good place to put tools that you're not going to use very often. As I said, we used the bed in the dinette. Particularly, Sarah had surgery on her foot at one point, and we had a 3-hour drive home from the hospital, and she lay in the bed for that. And it was ended up being a great thing when you're coming off drugs and all of that. But the storage space above the dinette, this was where the television and the radio were, and we had the television taken out before we took ownership of the van, and then I took out the radio and converted that into storage space. A cubby, just put a tray in there and a cloth-lined cardboard to back it. There was a hole in the roof where the antenna used to be, and they didn't do a good job finishing it, so I just took a napkin and put it around a piece of cardboard and screwed it up there. We actually put a digital picture frame on that wall occasionally, and that was nice to have. You see this wire rack over the sliding door. This is a modification that we really liked. It was a great place to store
hats and equipment for covering the windows in the front of the van.
That's right. And we did have to add certain things to keep it from squeaking when we were driving down the road. That's what you were seeing in that last shot. So here you see the dinette turnaround. We loved the dinette. I added a support for the cushion on the back of this little stool here.
I think it came off a walker, right?
Yeah,
like
I can't remember what it came off of, but somebody online recommended it, and I went ahead and did it, and it was really wonderful. So that cushion wasn't bouncing around. You see these storage things on the back of the front chairs, and we used those extensively to put computers in and that sort of thing. This front window cover is called a solar eclipse sunshade. Eclipse sunshade is what it's called. And here, this is an aftermarket cell phone holder that goes in the middle of the dash, and I installed that as well. That cost like over $200.
Yeah, it was because we didn't have what they have now, the modern
Yeah, we didn't have
Android Auto
good head
and
units.
Apple Auto.
There's some storage under the steering wheel there that got used regularly for spare fuses and ODB2 reader. The screen here, we're headed outside, by the way. The screen on the sliding door was hugely problematic on these rigs, but ours ended up working pretty well. It came off a few times. Sarah learned how to fix it. I never did. But it shipped with these clips on the bottom that you just saw me pull off there. And I think most people got rid of those clips, but I kept them on there. And I think most people, this would break, and eventually they had to get rid of it. But ours is still intact and still working. So it was great. We put Sarah's name on the back of the van, and we put a spare tire on the back of the van as well instead of our bike carriers. We just
Mostly superstitious, but
mostly superstitious. Actually, the only times we've had flats, we didn't have a spare tire. So the back wall of the bathroom here, I cut a hole in for storage. This is something that was fairly common. A lot of people did this with their rigs. And I stored hoses and the plug-in stuff there. I also, you see this arm there is for our new awning. We replaced the awning because the motor burned out in the electrical awning after about 4 or 5 years, and I replaced it with a manual awning so we didn't have to deal with that. And the manual awning worked great for us. Also, they had this retractable step. Once again, a motorized thing that just was not particularly reliable. Eventually, I took it off and put running boards on, which I like way more. I don't know how Sarah feels.
Standard now too.
Yeah, they come standard now. And there you see the bull bar on the front that we added after hitting the deer. Just peace of mind, essentially.
Also,
And
probably superstitious.
and superstitious. And I actually resealed some of the windows because of leaks. These vents were for the original refrigerator. And once I took out that refrigerator, I sealed up the vent to try to keep the insulation better. You can see there. I also added this storage for the sewer hose. It used to go in here, but I took that out and opened up that space, and that's where we ended up putting our upgraded electrical system. This is where the generator and the batteries used to sit under the van. And here you see my brother-in-law Brad taking out the generator for us. We had everything torn apart here. We put in 4 Battleborn 100 amp hour batteries, a 3,000 watt inverter, Victron inverter. In this space, you can see now it's all under the bed, so it's a little tough to get to, but it has worked great. It's been in for 4 years now, 4 or 5 years, and it's been really wonderful. We also added a new solar controller. I had upgraded our solar to 350 watts early on, and the controller that we had couldn't handle that much power. But so when we upgraded the electrical system, I put in the upgraded solar controller here that you see in the bottom of the wardrobe, and that's just worked great, and I can access all of that from my phone. Here you see the solar panels, which I built a extruded aluminum roof rack that we mounted those to and put a little fairing on the front to keep the air up. I bought something online, and it seemed to work from keeping the wind from getting up underneath there. Here's the control panel that I added to the space where the earlier control panels had been. And that inverter has been just amazing. It's worked really well. It's changed the way that we've used the van. It runs the air conditioner 3 to 4 hours in reasonable conditions, and it charges using the alternator. We also upgraded our air conditioning. We put in a Houghton heat pump air conditioner, and so it can be used as a heater as well as a dehumidifier, and it's way quieter than the original one that came with the system. We also added a cell phone booster system. That's what that yellow that used to be white antenna on the back is. It basically it reads the signal from the outside. It takes it in. You'll see we've got the main unit mounted here in the closet against the wall, plugged into a 12-volt outlet, and then it rebroadcasts the signal using a little black antenna that's up by the dinette. And it's been kind of a godsend, lifesaver, or a godsend. And you can see we've got, actually, there are 2 wires running back here. One of these runs from our electronic rearview mirror that's also aftermarket. They go up into this little raceway up here, which then goes out, and you'll see on the outside where they come out here in a minute. Here is what I'm pointing to there is actually a trickle charger for the chassis battery to keep it topped up, and then we also have, there's the antenna for the broadcasts the boosted cell signal. And that's all worked really well for us. This rear view mirror has been great. It has both a forward-facing camera and an exterior camera on the back. Here you see that mounted with VHB tape just to the top of that little box, and the wires come out through that box, so it was really easy to get that all working. Pretty convenient. So that's the last of the modifications. And as you can see, like I said before, we made the van exactly what we wanted it to be. We've been really happy with that. But unfortunately, there were still a couple more reliability issues with the chassis. The first of which is the glow plugs. Now, there's a design issue with the glow plugs in this where they're really fragile, and when you get some corrosion, they're impossible to get out of the engine. They break, and you have to then take the engine apart and send part of it to a machine shop, have the glow plugs drilled out. Now, if I'd known this, we could have had the glow plugs replaced at, say, 40,000 miles, because they cost like nothing. But I didn't, and so now the glow plugs are stuck in there. 3 of 4 of them are bad. Now the van runs fine unless it gets really cold, but still a concern, right? The last issue is the diesel emissions system. And they use something called diesel exhaust fluid. They reburn the particulate emissions to try to reduce them. And the van is set up so that the computer prevents you from running the van without diesel exhaust fluid. And unfortunately, these emission systems are notoriously problematic. When you start having problems, they're difficult to get fixed. And a lot of people just delete the system altogether. Now, we are now getting an error code in our diesel exhaust system. And in our most recent trip across the country and back, we were in upstate New York. And we got a message saying that we hadn't added diesel exhaust fluid, which is required for the system to run. We added more fluid, and the light didn't go off. And the problem with that is after 500 miles, it puts the van into limp mode so that it will only go 5 miles an hour. So we spent an entire afternoon in the middle of nowhere driving, coming up with strategies, looking at our schedule, where we're supposed to be, how we're going to get to these places, looking for dealerships that are going to service the van. It's really hard to find someone to work on this van. And eventually we added an additive to the diesel exhaust fluid tank that supposedly dissolves crystals. And then we added more diesel exhaust fluid. And after several hours, the light turned off finally. So all's well that ends well, I guess. We got all the way there. We came back the 3,000 miles on the way back with no problems. But we just decided at this point that all vehicles have a lifespan and that Bardd had earned a rest. So Bardd is going to a well-earned retirement at a farm upstate. My sister and brother-in-law, Brad, who I talked about when I talked about some of the mods I did, and who is more mechanically inclined than I am, are going. So Brad and Linda are going to take custody of the van, and they're likely going to use him for more local trips, mostly just in the Pacific Northwest. However, maybe we'll be able to get together with them and take trips in our new 2025 59 GL. Maybe we can even take a joint trip to Alaska. Wouldn't that be fun? Is there anything particularly that you want to add, Sarah? Something you liked or didn't like?
Oh, I love the van. That's all I have to say. It's, what I often say is it is probably unhealthy for me to love a material object as much as I have loved this van over 11 years and 176,000 miles.